Captain Maya Steele sat at the bar of Nexus Station's seediest establishment, nursing a drink that glowed purple and tasted like regret. She was trying to figure out why the 7-foot-tall Thrakari warrior at the next table had just wet himself and sprinted for the exit. All she'd done was order another drink. "Excuse me," she called to the bartender, a 4-armed Zentorian who was suddenly very interested in cleaning glasses that were already spotless. "Did I say something wrong?" The bartender's eye stalks swiveled toward her, then immediately away. You didn't have to say anything, Captain Steele. Your presence speaks volumes." Maya blinked. "My presence speaks volumes. I'm literally just sitting here." A nervous chuckle echoed from the remaining patrons, most of whom were now pressed against the far wall like they were trying to phase through it. Maya looked down at herself. Standard mercenary gear, plasma blade holstered at her side, same as always. She'd even showered this week. "They call you the Bladeless Death," whispered a small, furry creature from behind an overturned table. "The one who ends battles before they begin." The what now? Maya nearly choked on her drink. "Look, I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm just a regular mercenary. I do escort jobs, cargo runs, maybe some light conflict resolution. Nothing death-related." The bartender's laugh was high-pitched and slightly hysterical. "Light conflict resolution. She says light conflict resolution." He turned to address the room. "Tell that to the Crimson Raiders you dissolved in the Vega system." "I didn't dissolve anyone," Maya protested. "I convinced them that attacking a medical transport was bad for their image. We had a very reasonable discussion about it. After you made their flagship's weapons fire on itself," the furry creature squeaked. "That was an accident. Their targeting system had a glitch, and I may have pointed it out at an inconvenient moment." The bar's doors hissed open, and Maya's crew stumbled in. Zark, her Calarian engineer, immediately began scanning the room with 3 different handheld devices while muttering about atmospheric toxin levels and probability of ambush. His green, scaly skin was already shifting to its nervous yellow pattern. Finn, her human pilot, bounded in with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever on stimulants. "Maya, great news. I found us another job, and this one pays in actual credits, not just the grateful tears of rescued colonists." "Finn," Maya said slowly, "why is everyone in this bar trying to become one with the walls?" Finn looked around, finally noticing the crowd of terrified aliens. "Oh, that. Yeah, that's been happening a lot lately. I think word's getting around about your reputation." "What reputation? I've never even drawn my blade in a fight." "Exactly." Finn grinned. "That's what makes it so terrifying. They say you're so dangerous you don't need weapons." Maya stared at him. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." Zark's scanners beeped frantically. "Captain, my paranoia sensors are off the charts. Either this station is about to explode, or we're about to accept a job that will end in our spectacular deaths." "Your paranoia sensors aren't real, Zark. You just duct-taped a radiation detector to a mood ring." "And yet," Zark said gravely, "it's never been wrong." Counselor Vex was exactly the kind of client Maya usually avoided. Slimy, literally in this case, with skin that seemed to perpetually ooze some kind of mucus that made handshakes both disgusting and legally binding in hegemony space. His office on Nexus Station's administrative level reeked of desperation and whatever passed for cologne in his species. "Captain Steele," Vex said, his voice like oil sliding down a drain, "your reputation precedes you." "So I keep hearing," Maya muttered. "What's the job?" Vex gestured toward a sealed container about the size of a coffin, which Maya found deeply reassuring. "Simple escort mission. Transport this cargo to the Kepler outpost. No questions asked, no cargo inspections, definitely no peeking inside." "Right," Maya said. "And what's definitely not inside this container that I'm definitely not supposed to look at?" Nothing dangerous. Just some harmless cultural artifacts. Ancient pottery, perhaps some decorative weapons that definitely don't work anymore, maybe the complete technical specifications for a planet-killing superweapon. Vex's laugh sounded like a garbage disposal eating a cat, but mostly pottery. Finn, who had been examining the container with the intensity of someone trying to read the fine print on their own death warrant, looked up. This thing's got more warning labels than a nuclear reactor, in 14 different languages, including some that I'm pretty sure are extinct. Safety regulations, Vex waved dismissively. You know how bureaucrats are about their paperwork. Zark's makeshift paranoia sensor was now beeping so rapidly it sounded like a smoke alarm. Captain, I'm reading quantum signatures that suggest this container either contains something incredibly dangerous or incredibly dead. Possibly both. It's just pottery, Vex insisted, a bit too loudly. Maya studied the payment offer on her tablet. The number of zeros was definitely impressive, but then again, so was the number of ways this job could go spectacularly wrong. Fine. But if this is some kind of setup, I'm charging you extra for the therapy my crew's going to need. 2 hours later, they were aboard Maya's ship, the Reasonable Doubt, watching Nexus Station shrink in the view screen. The cargo bay now contained one ominous container and enough bad feelings to power a small planet. Captain, Finn called from the pilot's seat. We've got company. Lots of company. The kind of company that shoots first and asks questions later. Maya moved to the bridge's tactical display. A fleet of ships was moving to intercept them, and these weren't your average pirates. The lead vessel was massive, black as the void between stars and bristling with enough weapons to sterilize a continent. That's the Dread Fleet, Zark whispered, his skin now cycling through every color of panic known to science. They're led by Captain Morg the Merciless. He once ate an entire peace negotiation team just to make a point. What point was that? Finn asked. That he was hungry. No. Maya watched the fleet's approach vector. They were moving with the kind of precision that suggested military training and the kind of urgency that suggested whatever was in that container was definitely not pottery. Incoming transmission, Finn announced. The view screen flickered to life, revealing Captain Morg the Merciless. He looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of a space pirate, if Central Casting had a budget consisting entirely of nightmares and steroids. Scars covered half his face, cybernetic implants glowed red where his left eye should have been, and his tusks had been sharpened to points that could probably open cans. Maya Steele, Morg's voice was like gravel in a blender. Surrender the cargo, and we might let you live long enough to regret it. Maya leaned back in her captain's chair. Counter-offer. How about you explain why the galaxy's most feared pirate fleet is interested in Counselor Vex's pottery collection? Morg's laugh sounded like metal tearing. Pottery. Is that what he told you? That cargo contains the location of the Nexus weapon, the most dangerous artifact in the galaxy. And you're going to give it to us. The most dangerous artifact in the galaxy is in my cargo bay, and nobody thought to mention this to me? Surrender now, or face the wrath of the Bladeless Death. Finn shouted into the comm, apparently trying to be helpful. Morg's expression changed from menacing to confused to what might have been actual fear. The Bladeless Death? You're the Bladeless Death? Maya sighed. Apparently. The massive pirate captain, who moments before had been threatening to turn them into space dust, suddenly looked like he was reconsidering his life choices. Perhaps we could discuss this reasonably. 20 minutes later, 3 of Morg's boarding shuttles had attached themselves to the Reasonable Doubt like metallic parasites. Maya stood in the main corridor, watching her crew take defensive positions. Finn had his blaster drawn and was trying to look intimidating, which worked about as well as a kitten trying to intimidate a pack of wolves. Zark had barricaded himself behind a maintenance panel and was muttering what sounded like prayers to several different mechanical deities. Remember, Maya said calmly. "Let me handle this." "Captain," Finn whispered, "there are 30 armed pirates about to board our ship. Maybe this is the time to finally draw your blade?" "Trust me," Maya replied, though she wasn't entirely sure why anyone should. The airlock hissed open, and Morg's boarding party poured through. They were exactly what you'd expect from a crew called the Dread Fleet, a collection of scarred, tattooed, and generally disreputable individuals who looked like they'd been rejected from a heavy metal band for being too intense. The lead pirate, a mountain of muscle and bad decisions named Grex, pointed his plasma rifle at Maya. "Surrender the cargo, or we'll take it from your cold, dead corpses." Maya examined her fingernails with the kind of casual indifference usually reserved for discussing the weather. "You know, Grex, I've got to admire your confidence. It takes real courage to board a ship when you know the Bladeless Death is aboard." Grex's grip on his rifle faltered slightly. You're really her." "Depends," Maya said, taking a step forward. The pirates instinctively took a step back. "What have you heard?" "That you can kill a man with his own shadow," whispered one of the pirates. "That you once made an entire battle fleet surrender by looking at them," added another. "That you defeated the champion of Drax without even touching your weapon," Grex said, his voice barely audible. Maya nodded thoughtfully. "All interesting theories. Finn, what's the temperature in the cargo bay right now?" Finn, catching on to whatever Maya was planning, checked his tablet. Minus 40 degrees Celsius, Captain." "Perfect." Maya turned back to the pirates. "Gentlemen, I want you to understand something. I could kill all of you right now without drawing my blade. In fact, I'm going to demonstrate on your friend there." She pointed at a pirate who looked like he'd lost a fight with a food processor and lost badly. "What's your name?" "B. Brick," the pirate stammered. "Well, Brick, I want you to go to the cargo bay and secure our mysterious container. Take your time, really examine it closely." Brick looked confused but followed orders. Maya counted silently to herself. At 30 seconds, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "Captain." Finn called out, playing his part perfectly. "Brick's life signs are dropping rapidly. His body temperature is approaching lethal levels." Maya shrugged. "Cargo bay's a bit chilly today. Should have mentioned that." The remaining pirates stared in horror as Brick's voice came over the comm, chattering with cold. "Gee, guys, it's really sea cold in here. I think I'm getting frostbite." "Bring him back," Grex pleaded. "Why?" Maya asked innocently. "I thought you were here to take the cargo by force." "We surrender." Grex dropped his weapon. "Please, just let Brick live." Maya hit the intercom. "Brick, come back to the main corridor. And next time, maybe wear a jacket." When the thoroughly hypothermic but otherwise unharmed pirate returned, his fellow crew members looked at Maya with the kind of awe usually reserved for natural disasters and tax auditors. "How did you know?" Grex asked. "Know what?" "That the cargo bay was cold enough to kill someone." Maya glanced at Finn, who was doing his best to keep a straight face. "Lucky guess. Now, about that surrender." As the pirates filed back to their shuttles, Grex turned back one last time. "The stories about you, they're all true, aren't they?" Maya considered this. "Every single one," she said solemnly. "Especially the ones that haven't been told yet." After the shuttles detached, Finn turned to Maya with a grin. "That was brilliant. But how did you know the cargo bay was cold?" "I turned the temperature down while they were boarding," Maya replied. Also, Brick was clearly new to piracy. You can always tell by the way they hold their weapons. Complete amateur. "Mom." Zark emerged from his hiding spot, his paranoia sensor now emitting a sound like a tea kettle having an existential crisis. Captain, we're approaching the delivery coordinates, and my sensors indicate we're flying directly into a trap. Of course we are, Maya sighed. It's Tuesday. The Kepler outpost turned out to be less of an outpost and more of a heavily fortified military installation floating in the middle of nowhere. As the reasonable doubt approached the docking bay, Maya counted at least 40 hegemony warships surrounding the station, which was roughly 39 more than she'd expected for a simple cargo delivery. Captain, Finn said, his voice tight with tension, those ships are powering up weapons. Of course they are, Maya muttered. Zark, any chance your paranoia sensors have a setting for we're about to be spectacularly betrayed? Actually, yes, Zark replied, checking his makeshift device. And it's been screaming for the past hour. The docking bay's tractor beam grabbed their ship with the kind of gentle touch usually reserved for hostile takeovers. As they were pulled into the station, Maya could see armed soldiers taking positions around the landing pad. Incoming transmission, Finn announced. The view screen flickered to life, revealing Counselor Vex's slimy face, but now he was wearing a hegemony military uniform that looked like it had been tailored by someone with a severe misunderstanding of both fashion and an anatomy. Captain Steele, Vex's voice oozed with the kind of satisfaction that usually preceded someone explaining their evil plan in unnecessary detail. Welcome to your final destination. Let me guess, Maya said. The pottery story was complete garbage. Oh, there are definitely cultural artifacts in that container, Vex chuckled. The complete technical specifications for the Nexus weapon, the most powerful device ever created by the lost civilization of Arcturus Prime. One shot from that weapon can turn an entire solar system into cosmic dust. And you want this because, my dear Captain, the hegemony has been studying reports of your unique combat abilities for months. Every engagement you've been in has ended the same way. Total victory without drawing your weapon. We believe you've mastered some kind of advanced combat technique that transcends physical violence. Maya stared at him. You think I have mystical fighting powers? We know you do. The Battle of Zirian Prime, where you defeated an entire battalion of mercenaries without firing a shot. The incident at Vega Station, where you made a pirate fleet surrender by walking into their command center. The Drax Arena, where you faced their greatest champion and won without even unsheathing your blade. Okay, Maya said slowly, but did anyone actually ask me how I did those things? We don't need to ask. We have recordings, witness statements, sensor data. What we need is to understand your techniques so we can train our soldiers to fight like you. Maya looked at her crew. Finn was gripping his chair so hard his knuckles were white. Zark had turned a color that didn't exist on any known spectrum and was making a sound like a deflating balloon. And if I refuse to share these mystical techniques? Vex's smile was all teeth and malice. Then we'll dissect you to find out how you do it. But first, we'll execute your crew and the 300 civilian refugees we have in our detention centers, starting with the younglings. The connection ended, and Maya sat in the sudden silence of her bridge. Outside, she could see the refugees being marched across the docking bay at gunpoint. Families huddled together, children crying, all of them looking at the reasonable doubt like it might somehow save them. Captain, Finn said quietly, what do we do? Maya stood up and walked to the view screen, watching the scene outside. Well, first we're going to save those people. Then we're going to destroy this station and everyone in it. How? Zark asked, his voice barely a whisper. Maya turned back to her crew, and for the first time since she'd known them, they saw something in her eyes that might have been actual danger. By giving them exactly what they want, she said. A demonstration of the legendary techniques of the Bladeless Death. But Captain, Finn protested, you don't actually have any mystical fighting techniques. Maya smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. No, but they think I do. And sometimes the most powerful weapon you can have is your enemy's imagination. Maya walked through the corridors of the hegemony station like she owned the place, which, given her reputation, most of the soldiers seemed to think she might actually do at any moment. Her crew had been escorted to detention cells, but Maya had insisted on personally delivering the cargo as part of her surrender negotiations. The container floated behind her on a grav sled, and every soldier they passed stared at it like it might explode if they looked at it wrong. Which, given that it supposedly contained the specifications for a planet-killing superweapon, wasn't entirely unreasonable. Captain Steele, General Krex, fell into step beside her. He was a Draxian, all 8 feet of muscle and military precision, with scars that suggested he'd fought his way to his current rank through several small wars, and at least one large one. "I've been looking forward to meeting the legendary Bladeless Death." "Have you now?" Maya said conversationally. "I was the one who compiled the reports on your combat techniques. Fascinating stuff. The way you ended the Battle of Zerion Prime by convincing the enemy commander that his own men were plotting against him. Pure psychological warfare." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "That's one way to look at it." "And the Vega Station incident, making an entire pirate fleet believe their ships were sabotaged by simply pointing out some minor system malfunctions. Brilliant." "You know," Maya said, stopping suddenly, "I'm curious about something, General. How many security cameras does this station have?" Krex looked confused by the question. "Approximately 12,000. Full coverage of every corridor, room, and maintenance shaft." "Why?" "What?" "Just wondering how many angles you'll have of what's about to happen." Before Krex could respond, Maya reached over and tapped a control panel on the wall. Emergency lighting activated throughout the corridor, bathing everything in a red glow that made the soldiers look like they were standing in the middle of a horror movie. "What did you just do?" Krex demanded. "Activated the station's emergency protocols," Maya said calmly. "According to the manual I read while we were docking, this particular sequence indicates a containment breach in Section 7. There's nothing in Section 7 except maintenance robots." "Exactly," Maya smiled. "Computer, release all maintenance units for emergency sterilization procedures." The station's AI responded immediately. Emergency sterilization initiated. "All personnel evacuate Sections 5 through 9 immediately." Down the corridor, doors began opening and maintenance robots emerged. They weren't particularly threatening, just standard cleaning and repair units, but they were moving with the kind of purposeful urgency that emergency protocols demanded. The soldiers raised their weapons. "I wouldn't do that," Maya said conversationally. "Those robots are expensive, and shooting them during an emergency sterilization procedure will trigger the automatic quarantine systems." "You're bluffing," Krex said, but his voice lacked confidence. Maya shrugged and continued walking. "Try it and find out." One of the soldiers, clearly new to military service and possibly to thinking in general, fired at one of the approaching robots. The blast struck the maintenance unit, which immediately sent out a distress signal that activated every alarm on the station. "Hostile action detected during emergency procedures," the station's AI announced. "Initiating full quarantine lockdown." Blast doors began slamming shut throughout the corridor, separating the soldiers into smaller groups. The maintenance robots, now in full emergency mode, began deploying containment foam that turned the floor into something resembling a bouncy castle designed by someone with severe psychological issues. "How did you know that would happen?" Krex demanded, struggling to maintain his footing on the foam-covered floor. "I read the manual," Maya replied, still walking calmly through the chaos. "Also, your maintenance protocols were written by the lowest bidder, which means they're probably terrible." More soldiers appeared from side corridors, but the foam was now knee-deep, and their attempts to run through it looked like a very aggressive ballet performed by people who had never seen ballet. "Stop her," Krex shouted. Maya paused and turned back to face him. "General, I want you to think very carefully about your next move." You've seen what I can do with a simple maintenance system. Do you really want to find out what happens when I get creative? Krex's hand moved toward his sidearm, then stopped. Around him, his soldiers were struggling with containment foam, emergency robots, and alarms that were now playing what sounded like a funeral march composed entirely of air raid sirens. "This is impossible," he whispered. "How are you doing this?" Maya looked around at the chaos she'd created with nothing more than a basic understanding of poorly designed emergency protocols and an absolute willingness to press random buttons until something interesting happened. "Ancient Arcturus fighting techniques," she said solemnly. "Very advanced stuff. You probably wouldn't understand." She continued toward the detention level, leaving behind a corridor full of foam-covered soldiers and one very confused general who was beginning to suspect that everything he thought he knew about combat was probably wrong. The detention level was surprisingly easy to navigate once Maya convinced the security system that she was conducting an advanced interrogation technique that required all cell doors to be opened simultaneously. The refugees poured out of their cells like water from a broken dam, confused but grateful. "This way to the docking bay," Maya announced, pointing toward the emergency exit routes that were now helpfully illuminated thanks to the ongoing station-wide emergency. "Try to avoid the maintenance foam. It's probably not toxic, but I wouldn't want to bet my life on it." Finn and Zark emerged from their cell, both looking like they'd been expecting to be executed at any moment. "Maya," Finn called out, "how did you escape?" "I didn't escape," Maya replied. "I'm conducting a strategic withdrawal while demonstrating advanced combat techniques to our hosts." "What combat techniques?" Zark asked, his paranoia sensors now emitting a sound like a smoke detector having a nervous breakdown. "You haven't drawn your weapon once." "Exactly. That's the whole point." General Krex appeared at the end of the corridor, his uniform covered in containment foam and his dignity in roughly the same condition. Behind him, what remained of his security forces looked like they'd been through a war zone designed by a demented architect. "Steele," he roared. "Enough. Face me in single combat, warrior to warrior." Maya turned to face him, her hand resting casually on the hilt of her plasma blade. Around them, refugees continued streaming toward the exits while maintenance robots beeped helpful warnings about safety protocols. "You want to see the true power of the Bladeless Death?" Maya asked. "Yes. Show me these legendary techniques." Maya drew her plasma blade halfway from its sheath, the weapon's energy field crackling to life. Krex tensed, raising his own weapon, ready for the battle of the century. Then Maya stopped. "General," she said quietly, "if I draw this blade completely, this entire station will be destroyed." "Impossible." "Is it?" Maya looked around at the chaos that surrounded them. Emergency lights flashing, alarms wailing, maintenance robots wandering around like confused pets, and containment foam slowly dissolving everything it touched. "Look what I've done without even trying. What do you think happens when I actually make an effort?" Krex's confidence wavered. Around him, his soldiers were staring at Maya with the kind of expression usually reserved for natural disasters and tax audits. "You see," Maya continued, slowly sliding the blade back into its sheath, "the secret of the Bladeless Death isn't that I don't use weapons. It's that I don't need to. Why destroy my enemies when I can convince them to destroy themselves?" That's impossible," Krex whispered. "Is it? You brought me here to learn my techniques, and I've spent the last hour teaching them to you. Your station is in chaos, your security systems are compromised, your soldiers are covered in industrial foam, and 300 refugees are escaping while you stand here talking to me. All because you were so convinced I was dangerous that you created the very conditions that made me dangerous." Maya walked past the stunned general toward the docking bay. "The blade I never draw is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, General. It's called imagination." 3 hours later, the reasonable doubt was back in hyperspace with 300 grateful refugees aboard. The hegemony station was still dealing with what their reports would later describe as a catastrophic failure of all safety systems during a routine prisoner transfer. So Finn said as they settled into their course, "What really happened back there?" Maya leaned back in her captain's chair, finally allowing herself to relax. "I read their operations manual while we were docking. Their emergency systems were designed by idiots, their security protocols were written by committee, and their maintenance robots were programmed by someone who apparently thought helpful meant aggressively dysfunctional. But the containment foam, the lockdown systems, the way everything went wrong at exactly the right time." "Murphy's Law," Maya said with a shrug. "Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. I just helped it along." Zark's paranoia sensors finally stopped beeping. "So you're not actually a mystical warrior with supernatural combat abilities?" "Nope, I'm just really good at reading instruction manuals and pressing buttons until something interesting happens." "But everyone thinks you are," Finn pointed out. Maya considered this. "You know what? Maybe that's not such a bad thing. The galaxy's full of people who solve problems by shooting them. Maybe what it needs is someone who solves problems by thinking about them." A new message came through on their communications system. It was from a mining colony in the Outer Rim, requesting assistance with a pirate problem. The payment was good, the cause was just, and the sender had specifically requested the legendary Bladeless Death for the job. "What do you think?" Finn asked. Maya stood up and walked to the view screen, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, pirates were threatening innocent people, and those people had heard stories about a human who could end conflicts without violence. Whether those stories were true or not didn't really matter. What mattered was that people believed them. "Set course for the Outer Rim," she said. "The Bladeless Death has work to do." "And if someone figures out the truth?" Zark asked. Maya smiled. "Then I'll convince them that the truth is even more dangerous than the legend." As the reasonable doubt jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew toward their next adventure, the legend of the Bladeless Death continued to grow. In bars across the galaxy, beings whispered stories of the human who had destroyed a hegemony military installation without firing a shot. The stories grew in the telling, as stories do, adding details that became more spectacular with each retelling. But at the heart of every story was the same truth. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is the one you never use, and sometimes the greatest victory is the one where nobody has to die. Maya Steele never drew her blade, but the monsters still whispered her name as Death. And perhaps, in a galaxy filled with violence and fear, that was exactly what everyone needed to hear.